Not okay. I don't know what's wrong here.
Oh, he's there for a second.
I win. Doesn't look like it at all. Okay. No, you're not. Okay. So here we are in Genesis 29. The last thing we read, Genesis 28, the Lord says to Jacob, "Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." And then Jacob, upon having those blessings stated to him, he'll say in verse 21, "The Lord will be my God." Anytime you're going out on a trip, I recommend starting with "The Lord will be my God" as your words as you go along the way. Genesis 29, this brings us to our text for tonight. Then Jacob. Actually, guys, don't read for a second here, okay? No reading.
Don't read what? Bible or this?
Don't read your Bible. Do read this.
We'll quote you.
I can tell all over Facebook. God gives Jacob, Leah, Rachel, and Laban. Jacob arrives in the east. That's where we are. I want you to read this. This is the inspired text as translated by the ESV. I chose the ESV because everybody seems to at least tolerate the ESV. The ESV says, "Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well was where the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large." Verse 3. "And when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well." So we have a necessary exercise with implications. I love that title there. That's great. A necessary exercise with implications. Okay. Now I'll tell you how I came across this in just a second. But first of all, if I were to say to you or ask you, how many people are here?
It doesn't stay.
One at least.
Yeah, okay, yeah. There's more than one because shepherds.
So, there are shepherds there right there. This is all you have. This is the text. Are there shepherds there right now?
Doesn't say.
It does not say that.
Yeah,
It doesn't say it. So do you think it says it? No, I hope not, because it doesn't say it, right? Right? And so if I were to say there are shepherds there, then you would say, "Lee, you've gone too far." So I was reading this text, and the way my mind sometimes works, sometimes it works accurately, and this is one of the cases where I was thinking, I don't see any people yet, and then I come to this next verse. "Jacob said to them, 'My brothers, where do you come from?' And I think Jacob's speaking to sheep. And then they said, 'From Haran.'" So we have talking sheep. Obviously we don't have talking sheep. But if I said there were men up here from this alone, I would have made an unnecessary, unforced conclusion. But if I said from here that, we have men, would I be justified? Yes. And so there's a necessary implication from here about there. Yeah, there were men there. We're actually not stated. It doesn't say it. It does not say it, but we infer it because there are no talking sheep.
Right, but
Yes.
you could, verses 1 through 3, you could still infer that there were men there.
How?
Because the sheep flocks were there.
Yeah, but it's not necessary. You've left some sheep out somewhere. I got a guy.
I never owned a sheep in my life, so you gotta be careful.
Yes, that's right. I know that shepherds are generally with sheep. I understand that.
So you could
Necessarily?
yeah, you could say that.
No, okay, she says no, she says no,
Yeah,
she
but
says
you don't know anything about
yes,
sheep
you know, okay. So, because in fact, you've been down there too. Nathan Smelser's house, but they're fenced in.
Right.
All right, I don't want to make too much of this. Okay, but we get the difference. We get the understanding that, okay, there's a difference between a necessary or forced conclusion and one that where you can pull out too much there. That's it's not there. I'm not trying to pull it. I'm trying to pull out too much that's there. Okay. The same thing. Look for it here. Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. You probably remember where this is from. It doesn't. You don't have to. Here's the question. He, in this text, in this sentence right here, he. Do we know for sure that he will remain until I come? We don't. In fact, let me step back one further. Do we know it's his will that he remains? From this statement alone, we don't know, right? So this is John 21, 22, and 23. So the saying spread abroad from among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. From this statement, he's not going to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Jesus' point is, hey everybody, you just go ahead and you worry about yourselves. You do your work. If I let John live or whatever, that doesn't matter. Jesus doesn't say that, okay. John's point is, if it's not forced, you don't say it. If it's not necessary, you don't say it. Now, is this Church of Christ doctrine? Depends on how you're saying that, right? I can remember years ago, I was taking a Reed boy from the Reed home down to Manchester, and the Reed boy says to me, do you teach Church of Christ doctrine? And I said, well, yes I do. Romans 16, right? It depends on what you mean there. All right. So my point is, this is biblical. Number one, it's biblical. If it's not a forced conclusion, then we need to be careful about not saying it. It's biblical. And we're not the only ones that get it. Again, you don't have to get my point, you don't have to know more than what we're reading. Jude says something about Enoch. Remember what Jude says about Enoch? Well, you may or may not know that there is a book of Enoch. There's actually several of them, books of Enoch that are apocryphal or whatever, extra biblical. And Jude here seems to say something that one of those books says. All right. Jude, verse 14. Enoch in the seventh generation from Adam prophesied, saying, behold, the Lord came with many thousands of his holy ones. So on and so forth. So he quotes Enoch, which is also quoted in Enoch. To take Jude, listen to this argument. To take Jude as historically factual, Jude as factual, that requires one to conclude that this historical Enoch was the author of the intertestamental book of Enoch. Look, Jude talked about Enoch, and that other book is authored in the name of Enoch, so Enoch must have written Enoch for Jude to quote. That's his argument. I got a no out here. I agree. No. You can talk about something about somebody without them. You can even quote somebody without them having written some other article that also quotes them. All right.
When he says something is an intertestamental book, does he mean it was written during the intertestamental period?
Yes.
Or that it shows up as an intertestamental book?
To take Jude,
It was written.
Walton reasons requires one, the author. I get your distinction. I forget. So Walton is saying it's an intertestamental book of Enoch. I mean, most everybody, just to answer it this way, most everybody would say that that it is an intertestamental book. This man would say that Enoch wrote it, so it's not. It just showed up intertestamentally. But most people believe that it was authored intertestamentally.
Which is easy. trying to make the point that this is an error? This is something that...
This guy is making the point that man is an error.
But because seventh from Adam did not happen in the intertestamental period,
Right.
therefore throw it all out.
All he's doing is picking on this guy's argument.
Okay.
This is in the middle of about 8 arguments deep.
Okay.
All I want to point out is that this guy says this. This is surely an unnecessary inference. One may cogently argue that first Enoch preserves some authentic statements of the historical Enoch, the seventh from Adam, without attributing the whole of first Enoch to historical Enoch. Maybe that clears up something.
Yes.
But all I'm talking about here is look at this guy said. He ain't Church of Christ. Okay? But my point is, this is biblical doctrine, and this congregation here and others who often use the same words that we do see it, and it's not, we didn't invent it. Okay? And they see it also. All right. So, here is Acts 2:42. So here's a necessary exercise with implications. I know that I have just used Genesis 29 as a springboard. I've done that. I've left Genesis 29. Okay? We'll come back to Genesis 29. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship and the breaking of bread and prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Now, do you see in this passage a local church authorized to have a fellowship meal? Yeah, I got 3 no's. Do you see a maybe? I will be the first to say I see a maybe. I'll be the first to say maybe. But I will be the firster to say, but not necessarily. Now, I'm not just making this up. Here is a man who is a member of a congregation that has on its sign Church of Christ. This is what he says. There is no question but that the early church practiced fellowship of having love feasts, of eating together. We find in Acts 2:46 that the members of the church were continually with one mind, with one accord in the temple, breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and sincerity of heart, singleness of heart. This eating together from house to house was enjoying food which was purchased with money from the church treasury, because they had all given all their funds into the church's treasury, so that all they needed was taken from the treasury. Here's an example of church-supported dinners being held by the Jerusalem church under the direct supervision of the apostles. I'm afraid that the Jerusalem church would have been disfellowshipping Lee, I'm substituting my name in here, Brother Lee, and our anti-church fellowship meal people. Aggressively. Well said. Aggressively presumptuous, if you didn't hear it. They all gave all that they had, so that if they needed anything or all, they had to get it from the church. Those aren't even in the text. And then he has this being a work of the local church. He has this. This being a work of the local church.
Why isn't he following that? Why isn't everybody at his church giving everything they've got so that only the church can buy the food?
Right.
Because they don't even practice that.
Right. So there are inconsistencies abound. So the reason we come up with these little things, it's not there. You can't turn to this text. And even if you grant them a maybe, and I'll say, yeah, maybe they're doing something, because you go to Jude and they have their love feast, and in 1 Corinthians they're doing something. I know they're told not to, but right before they're told not to, they were doing something. And they're doing something in Jude. And they're doing something here. Okay, so maybe something like that. But to go from there to, so we can do that, is, it's to be aggressively presumptuous. I'm going to quote that from now on forever. Thank you. Okay, clear as mud? Good. Okay, back in Genesis 29, I promised to stay.
Lee,
Yes.
before you leave this.
Oh, okay. It's his fault, not mine.
Yes, it is. You have been bringing up recently, you went to a science center and they make assumptions and use lots of babies. So on my lunch break recently, I have been watching a documentary about Ballard's expedition to find the remains of Amelia Earhart's plane. And this is the first time I've watched something like this since you really started emphasizing that. And since then, this is exactly the thought I've been coming up with. My point here is that the necessary implication thing, not only do people see it, but they see it in places that have nothing to do with religion. And in this instance, this long thing is finding all the evidence they possibly can and coming up short of a necessary implication. Absolute proof is what they're looking for. And so they pursue what they have further. And then in this instance, when it disappoints them, they acknowledge it's not the actual proof, but they go with it anyway. And I'm an hour into an hour and a half of this thing,
Yeah.
and it's like over and over and over again. So it's 57 well documented indications that people across the world got a radio signal after it is known that her plane would have hit the water. So she was still alive, and her name and everything, they heard it. Okay, so she landed somewhere, but we still don't know it's here. So then we're here, and we find a skull. It was probably a female. It might have been of English origin or European ancestry, and so then they spend 6 months back at the lab trying to analyze it for DNA, but they can't find enough because of the acidity of the soil. And they follow each thing down, and they go, well, it doesn't eliminate the possibility, but we're so desperate to have it our way, we're going to say one thing and then do another. Over and over and over and over again. And the suspense is killing me because I know they don't find anything,
Yeah. Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? That is the wisdom of the world. I've left, and I'm telling you, I've left statement, command, example, necessary inference. And I don't say that because it's biblical. I say that because those are what you work with everywhere. Like you just said, has nothing to do with religion. Yeah, that's what we do, right? And so when you lead that, you end up speculating that. As one of the books says, your inner fish. My grandmother, the fish, or my grandmother is a fish, or whatever the picture is that I have of the book down there. Your inner fish, you evolved from a fish. Yeah, because of speculation. We leave concrete methods, facts and methods, and then we go off. Okay, so here we are. In Deuteronomy 29. But he's doing a good job. You see the patterns everywhere. It's the same pattern over and over and over. And once you start seeing that, you're going to think that there's a conspiracy, and there is. Genesis 29. Jacob went on his journey and came to the land. All right, so he goes, remember, he's going to find a wife. We are not going to take the time to read every syllable in this text. Verse 9. If somebody wants to say something about 1 through 8, please raise your hands. Verse 9. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came. So he was sent to Haran, the land of Haran, to the family of Laban. He is in Haran. They know the family of Laban. Here comes Rachel, Laban's daughter. Verse 10, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative. Kiss first, explain later. It's always, no, that's not a good, that's not a good method, but that's what he did apparently. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father, and he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. And the last we know about Laban, it's been 40 years since he saw his sister take off on a camel or whatever it was. So Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, and he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Then he related to Laban all things. Laban said to him, "Surely you are bone of my bone." And he stayed with him a month. And then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages be. What shall your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and face. I have seen several explanations for Leah's eyes were weak. It doesn't matter what it is. You get the point. She was unattractive for some reason to maybe everybody, but certainly to Jacob. But here's Rachel, who's beautiful in form and face. Jacob loved Rachel and said, so he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than give her to another man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. What a blessing. Verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her." Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him. Jacob went into her. Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me?" But one could belabor the point how he didn't know that it was Rachel. However, even now I have read that there is still the custom of the man going into his tent, into his bed, while it's dark, and the mother of the bride bringing in the bride, who is fully wrapped in a veil that's very long, and announcing that this is your bride, and the bride remaining completely silent during this entire time. I know that happens somewhere. Weird to us, but so again, I don't know what all is going on here. I know enough to know he is deceived. I know enough to know what goes around comes around. Not always in this lifetime, but here it is. He had deceived to his parents, his father, and so here he is being deceived himself. A couple things about this. Laban surely is his sister's brother, isn't he? She was a liar, he's a liar. Here's the sad thing. Neither of them had to be. Leah is also party to this somehow. She's participating in the deception. One would think she could tell Rachel. One would think that she could tell Laban. It doesn't matter who it is. She's participating in a lie. By the way, no big surprise that he's going to love Rachel more than Leah later on, if you consider this, although at some point he needs to get over it. Again, this family is just full of deception, and none of them have to be. Don't do that. Remember this. If one of your family is going down a road that's a bad road, you don't have to. Stop. Don't, it's horrible, but don't you. You can see it. You can identify, no, this is someplace I don't want to go. You don't want to go either. I will not go with you. And I've gone with you everywhere, but I will not go with you into sin. Remember this. Okay. There are 2 ways to have gone into this situation for Jacob. Jacob suddenly finds himself in this situation where this is no fun. This is bad. He has been abused. He finds himself in this situation where he's been abused. There's 2 ways to go into this kind of a situation. The one is having abused others beforehand, and the other is never having abused anybody else yourself. That's it. Because you will be abused. Now the question is, when you find yourself in that situation, are you continually abusing other people yourself or not? Psalm 69. The Psalms are over and over, God help me, God help me, God help me. And I count more than 20 times where it is stated, I paraphrase, I didn't do wrong. It'll also be stated, I've sinned, you know my sins, but in this situation, I did no wrong. Psalm 69:1, save me, O God, for the waters have threatened my life. I have sunk deep in the mire, there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters, and the flood overflows me. I am weary with my crying, my throat is parched, my eyes fail while I wait for my God. Those who hate me are without cause. Those who would destroy me are powerful, being wrongfully my enemies. What I did not steal, I then have to restore. So this is just one of many times where over and over, look, you're going to be abused. Been there, done that. Been there and done it, sadly. Right? You're going to be abused. And when you're crying out to God, the only way it works is if you get to say, I wasn't the one at fault here. Or if you were, then you've asked for forgiveness, right? So be careful of that. Comments or questions here? How should Jacob behave in this situation? He has been wronged. How should he behave? I'm not saying he did or did not behave this way. In fact, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with him because he did not say, I am not taking her, she is not my wife. You made the mistake, you deal with it. He didn't. So to that degree, I'm impressed.
I mean, he continues to suffer injustice for this because he did not get the deal, and the deal was changed on him.
Yeah.
And he had to double his work.
Yeah.
If I were put in a situation where I was told, if I do this, you will get something from it, and then I do the thing and I'm told, never mind, do it again, I would be upset by that. It's going to cost you $400, and so I pay the $400, and never mind, it's going to cost you another $400.
Yeah.
I'd be irritated.
Well, they only waited 7 days.
Yeah, but he had to work another 7 years.
He could have walked on the 8th day. He got married and left 2
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
But just to back up, just for a second.
Yeah.
Just to back up, because you said he could have said, look, you gave her to me wrongfully, I don't want her to take her back. But instead, he keeps her there, but doesn't love her.
Yeah.
So that, in some way, is almost worse than
Yes.
sending her back. Because she's stuck in a relationship with a guy who doesn't like her.
He spent 7 years not being able to get her married off first, though. So,
Right.
well,
I'll say this though, Gary. Where is she buried in the end? She's buried with Jacob in the end, and Rebecca is not. Now, I don't want to make too much of that. I can't make too much of that.
Right.
But that it may strongly say something about.
I mean, and all the striving that goes on in the next few years here.
Yeah.
Maybe my husband will love me if I do this
Right,
or I
right.
do this.
Right.
What kind
Yeah,
of
no,
life-
I'm not saying that what he went on to do was good.
Right.
No, I'm not saying that. But he should have. Exodus 21 is the passage that deals with this. And it says, look, if you take more than one wife, you better treat them the same.
Right.
Right. So I'm not saying that he was overall honorable. Nope. But I'm saying that I would suggest the rule was she became his wife.
Yeah.
and he didn't. An ungodly man might very easily have said, I don't care what the rule is. You tricked me. You take back you take back my wife. Back then, I mean, that would have been like easily done for them.
But would a godlier man have said, since the beginning it has been one man, one woman, and now
I don't know. Yes. Yeah.
But this is weird. Everything about this is, what I come away with, I don't really learn much except for it's really odd.
Yeah.
Well, what do you come away with? God doesn't want you to have more than one wife.
Yeah. You're right.
God.
I don't even know what I was saying now.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. Oh, I was saying, how should he be dealt with it? Well, here, Servants, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. For this finds favor, if for the sake of conscience towards God a person bears up under sorrows when suffering unjustly. For what credit is there if when you sin and are harshly treated, you endure it with patience? But if when you do what is right and suffer for it, you patiently endure it, this finds favor with God. You know, we're not going to find ourselves in this situation. But we're going to find ourselves in some situation. George is going to be charged $400 twice. And at that time, yeah, there are legal ways to go about handling all that, but at the same time, there are proper ways under God. Remember, don't let your liberty become an opportunity for the flesh, right? I got to get what's mine. No. You know. So, all right, here we are. He deceives him. He deceives Laban. So, you know the story, verse 28. Jacob did so and completed her week and gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. So now within the space of 8 days he has 2 wives. Laban also gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served Laban for another 7 years. Okay, this brings us to a new section of text. More about the marriage, so on and so forth. Does anybody want to say anything about what we've already read, talked about? Okay. Verse 31. So now we're married and we're having kids. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, and Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon. She conceived again and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me or honor me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore he was named Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. Then she stopped bearing children. All right, let's look at that. I should have said this earlier. What's a lesson you learned from this? From just these verses right there. I come up with this lesson. Don't have children thinking their presence will solve difficulties in marriage. She thought, she's got a horrible marriage, I'm going to have a kid. I'm going to have another kid, I'm going to have another kid. And then she has 4 kids, and it didn't help. That's not the solution. And how many times have you heard somebody talk about that? Don't have children thinking their presence will solve difficulties in marriage. Anything from anybody else?
God saw Leah suffering.
I'm sorry, what?
God saw Leah suffering.
God saw Leah suffering. I'll make another comment like that in a little while.
And he appreciated his sons. I mean, eventually,
Oh,
we know,
yep.
on his deathbed, when you look at, how he blesses each word, it's almost like prophecy for each one. I mean, he's grateful she produced them.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, in this particular instance, and for now, the introduction of children almost seems to make it worse, because things go real downhill.
Yeah.
I mean, was God trying to tell Jacob something here? I can't help but think that. God's trying to tell Jacob something. Listen, Belle, look. What's going on here? I'm blessing this woman, and you're not liking this woman. I mean, what? Come on, click here. Wake up.
Yeah, so Exodus, let's read it just to be clear. Exodus 21, this is the situation. What I'm about to say sounds like, will come out sounding like something I'm not saying. So I'm changing what I'm saying. I'm going to change what I'm saying and I'm going to start over. It's almost as though this author in Exodus 21 has situations like Genesis 29 in mind, right? It's almost as though. I wonder why. Because it happened all the time that men were abusive, right? If nothing else, I mean, the abuse of not being understood and not loved is enough. And then there's active abuse, right? So Exodus 21 verse 7, if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she does not go free as the man slaves do. She becomes married. If she's displeasing in the eyes of his master who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. If he designates for her his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. If he will not do these three things for her, then she shall go out for nothing without dowry or payment of money. So the point is, apparently it was really easy in that situation to neglect one or more of the wives. So, Gary's point is, he keeps on having, by the way, what does any man want out of marriage other than a good woman? Children. And if you can get a son, yay, I've got my firstborn son. And if you think that's true now, then back then, we have no concept of how true that was. And here he has right off the bat, 4 sons. I mean, that's fantastic, right? And so, yes, this is God, and he even knows these children are from God. He will go back to Esau and say, God gave me these children, right? And so your point is well taken. Hello, every time you have another child through her, that's saying, I'm blessing you through her, so you better appreciate her, right? Okay.
I think our culture is so separated from this, and really other cultures around the world even today, that have arranged marriages, that we can't even begin to just relate to this. I mean, I think we have trouble even understanding that.
Yeah.
Because it is such a different perspective on things.
Yeah.
And we're probably the freaks in history.
Yeah.
To think that you actually love your potential spouse before you get married, and you don't otherwise.
Yeah.
Because throughout history, marriages were arranged. And you've got Isaac,
Yeah.
you've got Jacob, over and over and over again. You've got marriages that are arranged kind of as a way of building a dynasty in the family. True in Egypt, true all over the place, really.
Yeah.
So, and we look at it, and I don't think we can appreciate
Right.
the differences at all.
And our culture is not necessarily wrong, as some of it is wrong. But what we're talking about, our culture is not wrong. And you know what? Neither is theirs. And it's so radical, so radically different, but yes. Verse 1. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she became jealous of her sister and said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. Then Jacob's anger burned against Rachel and said, am I in God's place who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Stop here. This is a great place to understand jealousy. When you are jealous of somebody, so generally the difference between jealousy and envy is when you're envious, not only do you want what they have, but you want them not to have what they have. Jealousy is just, I want it too. I want a tractor too. Okay? I want a tractor too. I want what she has. I want what he has. Now, in this case, who had given Leah what Leah had? God. Who had not given Rachel what Rachel did not have? God. What was Rachel's problem? Rachel? What was Rachel's problem? She was not content. Yes, she became jealous, but she's not content with what God has given. Even it doesn't matter how you look at this. She's not content with what God had not given her, and she's not content with what you got this blessing, and we teach our children, right? We teach our children, hey, when somebody else has something, but they got a chocolate thingy and I didn't. Good for them. I know, I don't like thinking it either. Right? But I've got to learn the lesson. I got to learn the lesson. Hey, good for them, good for them. They got a gift from God. What a wonderful blessing this is. Rachel needed to learn this. So here's a lesson. Be content with what God has and or has not given you and others. And notice what it made her do. Give me children or else I die. It's just crazy thought, just a crazy thought. But that's what jealousy does to us all. I'll continue, and then we can come back and look at this verse. So Jacob's anger burned. Verse 3, here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her so that she may bear on my knees, that through her I too may have children. So she gave him her maid Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has vindicated me, and has indeed heard my voice, and has given me a son. Therefore she named him Dan. Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again, and bore Jacob a second son. So Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and I have indeed prevailed. And she named him Naphtali. Point number 2 I have from this section, sin separates even family. There's two sisters. I don't know what it was like, but at some point they got along. At some point, sometimes they got along, and then sin kept on creeping in and creeping in and creeping in and creeping in. Let me ask you this. Does sin only separate siblings? Obviously not. Now, what's the method of correcting? Romans 12:18 says, if possible, so far as depends on you, be at peace with all men. Now, we have the expression, it takes two to tango, right? Two. Okay, so, was it always Leah's fault? No. So let's just take Rachel's perspective. What was her road to correction?
Same as Sarah's.
Which is?
Another.
Oh no, I don't mean the horrible suggestion. I mean what's really, okay, she's right, okay, so she's fighting with her sister. I have wrestled with my sister. Okay, you were fighting. Were they physically fighting? Obviously not. It was mental games all the time. That's what humans do. Mental game, mental game, mental game, mental game. I do this, you do that, I do this, I do that, you do this, you do that, so on and so forth. How does the wrestling stop? That's actually what I'm talking about. How do we get the wrestling to stop?
She's got to be okay with what God's dish.
Be okay? Yes. When the tongue comes out, first of all, you open the book and you look in the mirror. That's where it starts. And then you change. And it's gonna be easy, because change is always easy, especially changing yourself. It's really easy. No. And so you're going to make a mistake. Just one. And that time you make that one mistake, what do? The tongue came out and punched the other one right in the face. What do you got to do? It's not easy. It's not easy. But that is the road to recovery. The road to recovery is this little tiny step. I know I did wrong. I'm sorry. Even if they don't forgive you, even if they say nothing, even if they persecute you, you have done what you needed to do. So far as depends on you, be at peace with all men. That's what they needed to do there. It's so difficult, but that's what has to happen. All right, I'm done with this section, but we're not done with this section.
It is interesting to me that the one that is on record as being loved is the one that is on record as being angered with. Okay, so she's the one that he loved, and she's the one that he gets angry with, and she's the one that deliberately disobeys his will and makes him look like a liar later, right? Even though it doesn't get caught. But essentially, far be it from anyone in my family to do this. Well, guess which one did it? The one he loved.
Yeah.
Part of me wonders in this whole thing if she was beautiful in face and form, and maybe not a whole lot else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the family is all messed up. Laban's family, Rebecca's family, that family is, and so is Abraham's family. Yes, I forget you. Oh, right. So you look in this, you look at the story, and you see it's crazy. Everybody's crazy. And then you look in the mirror and you say, you know what? My family is too. It's just like this. It's just like this. This is my family. And then you go to Hebrews 11 and you find all these people in Hebrews 11. And like you said on Sunday, I will say it again now. Boy, am I glad to see this. You know, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Because we're supposed to hit perfect. That's what God wants. And so we get it into our mind. I've got to be perfect. I've got to be perfect. I've got to be perfect. And don't ever get that out of your mind. But don't ever forget the rest of it also. God sure does put up with a bunch of silly people. What?
And one other thing about this. you made a point. She says, give me children or I shall die. Okay, so summarize, she's crazy. And she comes up with this solution. And after 2 children down the road, my impression is that she is equally as crazy as she was before. Because by any metric, if she's honest with herself, she still has fewer children and they're still not hers.
Right.
So she's trying to argue with herself that, look, you know, I've battled with my sister and emerged victorious or whatever. Like, what are you talking about? You haven't done that at all.
Yeah.
You're just kicking the crazy down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, I don't know what it is. It's, I mean, it's wisdom. It's God's wisdom. He knows this is us. You know, that's what he knows. That's why he wrote it. He said, look, guys, I want to write Lee's name here, but I can't write everybody's name here, so I'll write one of you because you're all the same. Which is so sad. I had it in my mind to save it for later, but Marcy brought up that her solution to this problem is the same solution as Sarah's solution. The only point I'm going to make from it is probably not what Marcy had in mind at all. I'm going to make a different point, and that is this. You don't hear of Bilhah despising Rachel. You don't hear of it. That doesn't actually mean it didn't happen. But I know that, so I've got to be careful. I know the point can be made. Hagar did not have to despise Sarah. It may be able to be made from this, but it can be made from the text that I just read in 1 Peter chapter 2. Servants, be submissive to your masters even when they're crazy, right? Right? So Hagar didn't, you know, it's not like, and now we're looking in the mirror. I am never in a situation where, look, I just had to do it to him. There's nothing I could do to stop from my tongue coming out. Even if it wasn't to them, I went and talked about them to somebody else. I just couldn't help it. We're never in that situation. We are always in the situation where God will provide the way of escape. Even if it's just shutting my mouth and being beaten up verbally or literally, whatever the case might be.
Do most fathers not share with their sons some of the stupid things that they've done to warn them?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're talking grandpa here for Jacob.
Yep.
But look what Abraham went through because of all this.
Yeah.
And Jacob doesn't seem to know. I mean, he doesn't seem to know.
Yeah.
And what did and his father Isaac twice with his wife, look at the mistakes he didn't learn from his father to avoid.
There is a pride thing. Some people don't talk about their mistakes. I've decided that I have to. Otherwise I will, because I'm not going to win any other way. Because they're going to grow up and find out. You know, and they're going to see. When they grow up, they will realize, Dad, you messed up 1,000 times. And either I can admit it right now, and that way they understand I am imperfect. I am not like God. Or they can get angry at me later. You know what I mean? But that's other than that, I don't like talking about it. But I know pride comes in. When I spent a little time in Europe, this is different, but it's related. The people over there in Hungary, especially, would not talk about, the older generation would not talk about what happened during the Holocaust time. They wouldn't talk about it. And I would go up to, and I tried to do it gently, but I'd talk to people my age about what their parents had gone through, because I'd read it, and they hadn't. And they're like, no, that didn't happen to my parents. I said, you need to ask your parents. And sometimes we would know, yeah, no, that person, it happened to them, and their child doesn't even know it. Now, that's different, because that's they don't want to relive the horror of it. But it's still the same, but they need to. Who wants to relive the horror of the stupid thing you did? You know, I don't want to. But you need to, so you say, child, look. But thankfully, this book covers it too, so even if you don't, you'll find it in here. Say, I did that.
It's interesting that the children of the Holocaust that were Jewish, that grew up, what did they have? A tattoo on their arm.
Yeah.
And at some point, your child is going to say, Mommy, what's that? Daddy, what's that? And, I mean, we're dealing with those grandchildren now, in a lot of cases, not dealing with them, but they're still carrying on the knowledge of what happened. They know what their parents, what they went through. The guilty, children of the guilty don't.
Right.
Part of the hindrance is that we adjust ourselves to the consequences that have come as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even get comfortable with them. Or
Mhm.
maybe find things that we, accepted as solutions. That, I mean, life goes on after we've done these things, and it wasn't so bad after all, or, well, I've learned to live with it, or, I mean, if I can accept it for what it is, there's no reason why everybody else can't too. And
Even further, to say, well, this is actually what was destined for me.
Yeah.
Like God had this in mind for me. You see people who take a job that they should not take, and it puts them up in a situation where they shouldn't be, and they're weaker and weaker and weaker, and you try to go talk to them, and their language implies that they actually think this is the best they could have. No, you got to try.
Chance and I have a close friend who is almost exactly our age, who got married 2 years ago to a guy who's also our age. It was his fourth marriage. Her first. And when her sister tried to reason with her, what this girl said was, I'm just glad for those 3 previous marriages because they have helped make him the man he is now. And her sister said, well, if that's going to be your attitude,
You can't argue.
yeah.
Okay, you have a song. Thanks for your work, folks.